There are people who post gory things on the internet, and the worst of them is Dr. Gloves. This guy took shock content to such extreme levels that weirdos who were used to seeing gory things became so uncomfortable they tried to get him arrested. Between 2015 and 2017, Dr. Gloves posted some really disturbing pictures on the internet, and if you see them, they will make your skin crawl. I'm talking about pictures of dead fetuses and human organs. To make matters worse, he didn't download these pictures from a dark corner on the web and repost them. He was taking these pictures himself, but it gets worse. Dr. Gloves also posted pictures where he was seen harming little children. How he got access to these children and the fetuses was a puzzle the internet spent countless hours trying to solve. There have been multiple theories over the years regarding his real identity. I'm going to take you through everything I found out from this disturbing rabbit hole. The things he posted that made his community love him, and the things he posted that were so despicable that the same community turned on him. But I must warn you, it's unlike anything you've ever seen. Let me set the scene, because you can't fully understand this case and why images of such nature were posted online without understanding the corner of the internet came out of. From the late 1900s through the mid-2000s, there was a surge in websites featuring what people called shock content. These sites existed for one purpose, and that was to show you some of the most gory things ever caught on a camera. For close to 2 decades, these sites basically operated without any legal constraints, and nobody was really moderating them. But all of that changed in 2013, and here's why. Back in 2012, a man named Luca Magnotta murdered and dismembered somebody called Jun Lin. He recorded the whole thing, then sent the footage of the killing to the owner of a site called bestgore.com. The website was run by a man named Mark Marek. In 2013, Marek was arrested and charged with something you might have never heard of: corrupting morals. But some fans thought the arrest was unfair. One user commented that he took the video down after he learned it was real. He let the police know, and they didn't believe him. The video was only viewable there for a couple of days before being taken down. There are other sites where it's still viewable, yet no mention of those sites. The case attracted media coverage as it continued in court. So many shock content sites came under pressure. One after another, these sites went dark due to ad revenue losses, legal pressure, and hosting bans. But one of them did not shut down immediately, and that was Death Addict. It became one of the last major sites standing, so it naturally absorbed users from other shock sites that didn't make it. Somewhere in the Death Addict community, in a private forum populated by people who had spent years desensitizing themselves to gory content, a new user showed up and posted something terribly disturbing. It is not entirely clear when the first image was uploaded. While some background details in the earliest photos could date back as far as 2014, the investigators who examined them closely concluded that the material was most likely posted between 2015 and 2017. The detail that is consistent across every account of this case is where it was posted, and that was on Death Addict and 4chan. If you don't already know, 4chan is an anonymous image board launched back in 2003. On 4chan, everyone posts anonymously, and it's responsible for a huge chunk of the meme culture you grew up with. But it's also historically run with almost no moderation on certain boards, which means it hosted everything from harmless jokes to genuinely disturbing content that slipped through before anyone caught it. There is no username tying this guy to 4chan because he posted anonymously there. However, on Death Addict, where an account was required, he used the name Master, but people gave him the nickname Dr. Gloves, and that was where his story began. Sometime between 2015 and 2017, a user named Master started posting images on Death Addict and 4chan. Now, keep in mind, this was a gore forum, so graphic content was expected. However, what made this particular user different wasn't that his posts were graphic. It was the fact that he was taking these images himself. While most people posted pictures and videos of others, he was creating his own original content. For the sake of decency, these images have been censored because most people find it hard to stomach the uncensored versions. Upon seeing the uncensored version, one person commented, "I remember accidentally stumbling across the images when they were uncensored, and even to this day, I still remember them so vividly. So sickening. I would not recommend looking at them. They're unimaginably horrific." The first set of photographs showed a man in surgical gloves wearing a black leather mask. Sometime sometimes paired with what has been described as a hazmat-style coverall in a medical setting. The masked figure posed with brains of infants that were placed on a tray inside a room that resembled a walk-in cooler. People have tried to come up with different theories regarding how he got access to those organs, one person commented. I honestly think this is an individual who works in central sterile processing. They travel and deal with medical tools and knowledge with access to these locations. Most hospitals keep their sterile cleaning centers in a basement, almost next to a morgue. Another person said, what if he was a janitor? They have access to almost every part of the hospital and would know what time certain areas would be empty. The craziest part of the whole thing is that his audience enjoyed his work because after the first set of images, he kept upping the ante. In the series of images that followed, he was seen holding a dead fetus. In one image, he is choking the dead fetus. In another image, he appears to be operating on the dead fetus. It's not clear if he used the same dead fetus to take these images or if he had access to multiple fetuses. Whatever the case was, it was incredibly disturbing, as this person put it. Just because you are by law allowed to touch the corpses and deal with them, you are not allowed to hold the deceased babies up by their neck and take pictures of them in a GIMP mask, and then put them up on the internet. I don't think that is in the law books. It's an abuse of power, and also an abuse of a person, and also abuse of a corpse of a child. He should be thrown under the jail. Oh, and yes, plugging the nose of a child who is already on assisted breathing cannot not be against the law. He posted more images where he did degenerate things to dead fetuses, but I think you already get the story, so I won't bother to describe any further. Some people noted that the images showed a level of focus and clarity that wouldn't have been achieved with a typical cell phone camera at the time. They speculated that the pictures were most likely taken with a traditional camera, implying that whoever he was, he had the privacy, time, and setup to deliberately take them, rather than snapping in a rush or at an opportunistic moment. And the obvious question remained, how did he get access to the organs and feet without anyone noticing that they were missing? Facilities that handle remains generally track them closely, probably, so things like this never happen. So either there was a serious gap somewhere in a facility, or Dr. Gloves had direct access to these body parts, and nobody has been able to explain how. In a twisted way, the first set of images was well received by the death addict and 4chan audience who saw them, and they wanted more. But what happened next was so disturbing that even his audience could not handle it. Everything covered so far, as disturbing as they are, stayed within one category, and that was the remains of non-living fetuses. But the next set of images changed everything. According to the original investigation, one additional set of photos reportedly showed the same masked figure with a young girl estimated to be under 5 years old. In one picture, he is seen grabbing her by her hair, and in another picture, he is holding her head towards his groin. There have been many speculations as to who the girl is, if she was his child or a missing person. People were horrified. This person commented, I recently went back through the Dr. Gloves case, and the one thing that I can't get out of my head is that the young girl that he holds by the hair, she could quite possibly be his very own daughter. Sickening. The office looks like a room in a house or apartment, and the fact that he's holding a camera clicker must mean he's using a tripod. He knows to keep himself out of the photos as much as possible and hides the girl's face. Pretty scary stuff. Another person also commented, the part that caught my attention the most in this case was the photos of Dr. Gloves with a little girl in a pink shirt. I hope she's doing well, and when she grows up, I hope she can help investigate the case. The investigators who reviewed these images concluded that they were most likely taken outside a hospital. Things like a rocker-style light switch and what looked like a cable television hookup all read as more consistent with a private home than any medical facility. Also, there is no visible medical equipment connecting this child to the hospital setting shown in the other photo sets. As if the images of the young girl weren't bad enough, Dr. Gloves released pictures showing multiple disabled and medically vulnerable children inside a hospital. Most of the children were connected to life support. In one image, Dr. Gloves covered the nostrils and the mouth of the baby. In another image, he covered the entire face of the baby. And mind you, these babies were on life support. Nobody knows how he got access to these children reacting to this user wrote in the comments. I just don't understand how he got into a NICU, and somehow his nasty behavior wasn't caught on CCTV. Absolutely ridiculous. Posting the picture of the girl was a turning point for some of Dr. Gloves' audience because it was a deviation from what shock content was about. At that point, some people were already trying to expose his real identity, but the images of him disabled children on life support made practically everybody turn on him. These were the last set of images Dr. Gloves uploaded before he completely disappeared from the internet. The same audience that cheered him on was the same people that tried to expose his identity and get him arrested. This user commented that half of me is disgusted that some of these forums exist and that people visit the forums, but the other half is grateful that some of those visitors have spent hours trying to help track down this psycho. The situation eventually moved from being just another disturbing piece of content on the internet to an active criminal investigation. But the question was, did Dr. Gloves leave enough clues in the pictures that could point to his real identity? After the last set of pictures were released, people from the 4chan and Death Addict forums who saw the images first started analyzing them to see if they could figure out his location from the picture. They analyzed the surgical tools, the make and manufacturer, they analyzed the fire extinguisher in one of the pictures, and basically anything else they could find. One person said, "That fire extinguisher should have been a huge identification tool. They are checked every year and are tagged for inspection, almost always by a local company with clear and present identification. It might have not been checked for years, but still it would surely help. Also, an illegal facility will definitely not have one on the wall." But the clue that became the biggest breakthrough was a badge with a name on it that was visible in one picture. It seemed Dr. Gloves had slipped and made a mistake. The name on the badge was Edvin Baljans, and Edvin was an actual doctor, so on the surface, it looked like the case was solved because people had long speculated that Dr. Gloves was in the medical field. The badge was basically proof that an actual doctor was behind the masked figure. The internet did exactly what you would expect. The name spread within a short time, and the real Edvin Baljans reportedly faced serious online harassment from people convinced they had cracked the case wide open. The original investigators who examined the pictures were skeptical of the badge from the start, and their reason was simple. Why would someone go through the trouble of wearing a mask specifically to hide his face, then leave a perfectly legible name badge in plain view? That obvious contradiction is exactly why most people believed the badge was either photoshopped or deliberately staged to mislead people. Reacting to this, one comment said, "The badge could have been lifted by him or found on the ground if the doctor dropped it by mistake. If so, a lot of hospitals will share badge access between facilities, meaning he could have used it to gain access to the morgue after hours. Badge swipes are also normally logged by hospitals. Maybe check the badge's swipe logs, see if it accessed the morgue, and if so, check security cam footage in the hallway and morgue itself, as well as the parking lot." Another person expressed sympathy for the doctor who got harassed. "I feel really bad for the doctor whose identity was mistaken for Dr. Gloves. Imagine being wrongfully accused of something so disgusting." Either way, chasing that badge led nowhere, and it cost an innocent person who had nothing to do with Dr. Gloves a long stretch of online harassment. With the badge clue leading to a dead end, online investigators hoped the next clue would lead to a better outcome, and it led to Dignity Health. In the fourth set of images that Dr. Gloves released, people noticed the design on one of the blankets, and they were able to trace it to Dignity Health. It felt like the breakthrough was close, but some people thought it was just another misdirect. In the comments, somebody said if he was smart enough to Photoshop the ID badge in, he could have gotten the blanket from a yard sale or someone who had a baby at a hospital that used them. Maybe, if he works in hospital housekeeping or maintenance, he would have access to different areas at night. When the information was brought to the hospital, it was reported that Dignity Health said unofficially that they had no record of anyone like Dr. Gloves working for them. But that did not stop people from speculating in the comments. I think we need to take the hospital's statement with a grain of salt. How can they be positive that the masked man with no identifiable features doesn't work there? It seems more like a PR statement to save face than a full investigative conclusion. And even if he doesn't work there, what does that say about their hospital? That a random man was able to come there and have access to child remains long enough to suit up and take multiple pictures without being noticed. The thing is, no one ever proved that Dr. Gloves got the and organs from Dignity Health. It was also never proven that the pictures with the children were taken inside this hospital, even though some people tried to push that narrative. Dignity Health seems super shady, considering there were likely multiple people involved. How do multiple people get unauthorized access to vulnerable children, who in my opinion need to be monitored to some extent? Again, the only connection that existed between Dr. Gloves and Dignity Health was the blanket. Everything else was pure speculation. And because no other clue surfaced, the trail eventually went cold. Over time, there have been different theories, speculations, and even rumors regarding this case. So let's separate the facts from the noise and investigate some plausible theories. First, there was a claim that the FBI refused to investigate either because the statute of limitations had expired or because nothing illegal had actually occurred. This comment cleared that up. It's worth noting that the source of the most in-depth information on the case, the Invisible Choir, allegedly followed up with San Bernardino Police and FBI field office and confirmed that, to their knowledge, no record of the case ever being reported to either of them existed. The source of the claim that the FBI said there was no illegal activity is an anonymous forum user, and it was likely not true. So, according to investigations from the Invisible Choir, the podcast that initially brought this case to public knowledge, both federal and local enforcement agencies were involved in the case by 2023, and no record showed that they refused to get involved before 2023. Therefore, this claim does not hold up. Next is the theory that Dr. Gloves was definitely a hospital employee. We have nothing proving he doesn't work at a hospital. All we have is a PR response from the hospital. This theory is genuinely more complicated. The original podcast investigators who examined the photos directly actually leaned toward this being plausible. They noted that whoever appears in the images had access to spaces most staff wouldn't casually wander into. They speculated that he could have been a physician rather than a nurse or technician, based on what he's wearing in some of the pictures. But that's informed speculation from amateur photo analysis, not a confirmed fact. The hospital's own statement only goes as far as saying they're not aware of the individual, which is not a confirmation or a denial of employment either way. I will call this an open, reasonable theory rather than a proven fact. The final theory is that it wasn't one person acting alone. There are people who believe that there were two people involved in the disturbing acts. They speculated that the pictures of the disabled children may have been taken by a completely different person than whoever appeared in the morgue and residential pictures. You will find comments like this online. Maybe he had an accomplice who had access to the morgue and to the other places and let him through. Also would explain the photography angles. Another comment said, "It's very clear to me that Dr. Gloves is actually two people unless he periodically shaved his arms and then grew his arm hair back out. It's pretty obvious that one man has very hairy arms and the other person, probably a woman, has no hair on her arms. Her hands are also smaller and a different shape to the man. I'm not sure why people thought this was all a single person and not investigating the female in the photos. What led to this idea in the first place is the belief that the two-person theory helps explain one of the most recurring questions of this entire case, which is, how would a single person have unsupervised access to both fetal and infant remains in a secure pediatric care facility? Both require different levels of access. A two-person theory easily resolves that tension, but it also makes the case much harder to solve. And the reason is that identifying one person with unusually wide reach within a hospital facility is hard, but identifying two separate people with two separate points of entry is significantly harder. To be clear, this is presented as a working theory, not a proven fact. So where does the case stand right now? I want to close this out by stepping back from the individual details and talk about why this case has stuck around in true crime circles for close to a decade. And it's because of the nature of the case. It involved children. Death Addicts, a site built specifically to satisfy people's morbid curiosity for shock content, still drew a line here. Also, 4chan, a platform with a reputation for close to zero moderation, still had threads on this topic pulled by moderators under existing rules against content involving children. Even in communities built around desensitization, this case crossed a line by a mile. When 4chan, 8chan, or Shardy thinks you went too far, that is quite far. Playing with children and abuse live ones would likely do it. To this day, the case against Dr. Gloves remains open with San Bernardino authorities. There were talks in the comments section of a breakthrough in mid-2025. Some people said the identity of Dr. Gloves has been discovered and he has been arrested, according to this person. Update: they seem to have found him, but info hasn't been released yet. Crimes may have occurred in San Bernardino. Before they removed everything, the site said, at the request of the San Bernardino Police Department, portions of this website have been temporarily taken offline to avoid jeopardizing what they describe as an active and ongoing investigation into the individual, known as Dr. Gloves. But I couldn't verify it through any credible source. What I can tell you, based on verifiable public information, is that no name has been released, no arrest has been announced, and the case remains active. So, if you know something, contact the San Bernardino Sheriff's Police directly. Perhaps you may provide the vital clue that will help put this degenerate behind bars forever.